On today's video, we're going to discuss how to make the Hollow Knight costume that I made for Halloween this year. So I could go to the Texas Renaissance Festival and kind of, run into people that were fans of it. And I just did it because I thought it would be fun. I just finished playing the game. I beat the Radiance, and that's about it. 100%, 103% completion of the game, but not hardcore. I didn't get the 112 completion. I don't know if I'll ever do that, but in any case, I thought the game was very beautiful and engaging. So I decided to make this costume. So here we go. We start here by using cheap materials first to see how to make the mask. I would recommend that before you cut into your expensive materials, you just use something cheap. Something good to use is thin rolls of cardboard. These can come from packages, or maybe when you buy that wrapping paper and then the little tube inside. Sometimes it's not a tube, it's just a little cardboard paper, and that's what it's made of. So I just put it on my head to see how it fits. And here I'm looking at the Hollow Knight. I printed out Hollow Knight in different positions, poses, and things, so I could get a perspective on how to make the face mask, basically. And here I'm showing you that I'm using a metallic pen to draw on top of the foam. In a little bit, I will show you what type of foam it is. It's an EVA foam. I'm just getting the overall size for it, so I'm just using myself to see, okay, is this wide enough? As a person with glasses, here's the foam, the EVA foam. 6 millimeters is what I use for the helmet. As a person with glasses, it's always important to make the helmet a little bit bigger, because it's so uncomfortable to put on a tight helmet when you have glasses, like me. I was also showing you that I use like a tailor's measuring tape. The reason I don't use a straight measuring tape is because when you're using a tailored measuring tape, you can bend it around areas, so you can get a more accurate measurement instead of taking a straight measurement, which will not align if you're making curved surfaces. So that's why you get a little tailor measurement tape. My tailor measurement tape came with just like a sewing kit that I had bought, and it's just a paper one, but I do like the little plastic ones. They're a lot more durable. Here I'm just drawing the eyes on the piece of foam, and I'm just making sure everything's nice and symmetrical, and I'm measuring 2, 3, 4, 5 times to make sure everything's right. When you start cutting into your more expensive material, you don't want to make a mistake. So not saying that mistakes don't happen, I'm just saying that you can mitigate mistakes by measuring a lot. Here basically I just outlined, after doing my measurements in light pencil, I just went ahead and used the marker. Here I'm showing you that I use an X-Acto knife. This is a number 11 blade. Never use a number 2 blade. That is a common mistake, especially by a lot of architectural students. They use a number 2 blade. Use a number 11 blade. It's a lot more sturdy, and is one of the best things in the world. Just make sure it's always sharp, so you don't get any bits and pieces all over the place. Here I'm just fitting it. Just making sure the curve is fitting, and every once in a while I just put it on my head to see how it goes. I'm using this all-purpose cement. Apparently, I've been watching videos about people that make cosplay costumes, so a lot of these materials I'm just getting from their videos. I'm kind of cannibalizing their videos to make my own video. I apologize about that to whoever else makes this stuff. But I figure the more we spread the word, the more people will know what kind of materials to use for their cosplay, and we will start making better product, basically. Here I thought it would be, I wasn't sure if I wanted to make the whole mask out of one piece. I decided because the curve is not a circle, it's an ellipse, I decided to make it in 4 parts. The front part, the back part, and the 2 side parts. Here I am measuring the side part. Just to try to get more accurate. I didn't just want to go with one curve and then it not line up properly and not get the right bend and dimensions to the mask. When coming up with the hollow mask shape, I discovered very early that it looks just like a marshmallow. And this is also evidenced by the fact that a lot of people that didn't know Hollow Knight and saw me around, they thought that I was cosplaying as a marshmallow. And so yes, if you are worried about how to make this shape, just look at a marshmallow and use that for reference. There you go. Here I'm just putting everything together. This glue is very messy. That applicator is good and bad because when you take it out of the bottle, it tends to leak all over the place. So maybe getting a little stick of wood might be better, although the brush is nice on the applicator. I say that the brush helps a lot to retain, because the brush helps you retain more glue, whereas a stick doesn't really retain glue, it just carries the glue on the surface. The brush actually absorbs some of the glue so you can apply it more evenly. Here I'm using the Dremel just to clean up some of the edges. You can see that, you know, the edges are a little bit yellowish because of that glue, and also I just wanted that to be a little bit rounded. Hollow Knight doesn't have, except for Hollow Knight's weapon, the nail, Hollow Knight itself doesn't have hard edges, right? The marshmallow has no hard edges. So basically I'm just doing the Dremel thing here. And then I clean up and I keep doing. I should have done this outside actually. It's a little bit messy to be doing that inside, but it was nighttime. Then I got this gesso, which is also recommended by the people that do cosplay, and but it's a little bit thin. I wasn't as happy with it. The heat gun I haven't mentioned yet. You need to get a heat gun if you're working with EVA foam. When you heat the foam, it closes the pores on it and makes it available to be primed, basically. But the second thing that it does, actually the most important thing that it does, is that it allows you to bend the foam, and once you bend this foam under heat, it retains its shape for the most part, so it's very useful. Here I'm trying to use the gesso to cover up the imperfections at the joints, but this gesso that I got is too thin. So I guess learn from my mistakes. I mean, that this is not the thing I should have used for this application. I guess it helps a little bit to hide it, but it's too thin. So it doesn't really actively cover it in the way that I want it. So I just applied it and waited for it to dry. Once it dried, I could still see the seam. So I was not very happy with it. And here I'm just using a clay shaper's tool to like kind of spread the gesso around. And what am I doing here? Oh, I'm making the horns for the helmet here. So there's many different ways in which you can make the horns. You can either stack the foam and then just shape it with a wire cutter, which I've done something similar before, but this time I decided to just roll the horns. So I just cut two pieces. I used a heat gun to just try to roll it super tight. This took me quite a while. And then trying to get the bend was a little bit tricky because this thing will always bend so much. And so I'm trying to bend this as much as I can. And then here I'm just applying glue just to make sure that it stays put. And this glue is so messy that I put on my blue gloves. So 2x2 hands of blue. Go watch FabricLA if you haven't. So here I'm just, it's taking a while. So I'm just like really pressing it hard using the heat gun and just using the glue and trying to get the right shape. Because Hollow Knights, I don't know if you call them antenna or horns or whatever, they curl all the way up. So that's something that you definitely need. Here I'm just cutting the holes. I went ahead and measured both sides, or kind of eyeballed it very carefully so that they were both in the same spot. Symmetry is important. And then again, I still use my X-Acto knife, the number 11 blade again. Here I'm just putting glue to make them stay. The problem I ran into here, this is my first time building this kind of thing, so I'm running into problems, and so I'm going to tell you how I try to solve them. The problem here is that I'm bending the antenna, but they're not staying upright, basically, or not as upright as I want. You see, I hold them up and then they just come back down. So I will fix this later. Right now I'm showing you the form clay that I'm using. A lot of cosplayers use this apparently. And so what I'm doing is I'm using it to seal the joints and to cover the antenna. And I also, instead of the gesso, didn't really work very well, so I'm using it to try to seal the joints on the mask. And so it's actually very easy to work with. You apply it, and then if you notice, I have a little container with water next to me, so I can just dip my fingers in it, and it'll make that form glue adhere more to the piece, basically. Actually, I recommend that you kind of wet the surface first, because if you don't, it won't adhere as well. But I do find that if you wet it too much, then it just becomes like super putty and very liquidish, and then it starts running. So there's an optimal consistency for it, and you're just gonna have to play with it. For this, I put a little bit less water because I wanted more of a massive thing and not so runny, and so I just used it kind of straight out of the bag, just using a little bit of water here and there just to try to cover the antenna. And there you go. Next day, I am just applying more of the foam, you know, in places where I saw there wasn't enough. So I just I was trying to be more meticulous because this piece is all white, and any imperfections are going to show when you're working with a piece that has no corners, that is very smooth. It's going to call attention to many of the places that are not smooth. I'm showing you inside how I put some wedges under the horns so that the horns would stay up. And here I am actually making a little cap for my head, which I'm going to glue inside the helmet. This is so that my head doesn't rest just on the flat portion of the helmet, and so that I can actually make it. And so there I actually put a spacer in between this helmet piece, this little sculpt cap, and the helmet. I made a spacer piece so that it would hang a little bit lower, so that my eyesight would align more with where the holes were. Here I'm making a chin strap. It's important to do a chin strap because when you turn your head around, if you don't do a chin strap, your head will turn, but the helmet won't turn, and it can be very frustrating. Here we're starting with a nail. Hollow Knight sword in essence, which is called a nail, and so I just took a piece of, I think, 1-inch PVC pipe, and I used a saw. I didn't include the part when I'm actually cutting it, but I used just a regular wood saw, you know, a hand saw basically, and I just cut it to size. And here I just kind of eyeballed, you know, this part I kind of just eyeballed it, and I just drew it and cut it. Once I have one side, then I can just trace that on the other side so both sides are the same. And then what I do is I just glue them together over the PVC pipe. The pipe is not going all the way to the end, so the tip is the tip doesn't have the PVC in it because it would look weird. So I just finished it early. Here I'm just trimming the edges to clean it up a little bit. And let's see what else. The sword is probably the quickest thing to do. Here I'm just gluing the tip. But you see that the tip is kind of flimsy because there's nothing in it. There's really no material in the tip, so I decided to, yeah, go ahead and make jokes about the tip. I know you want to. Let's keep moving. This sword had a lot of undulations in it, so that's why I was using the heat gun to like kind of straighten up those little waves. Here I'm using some of the foam. Some of the clay, the like form clay to fill in the gaps in between. It's actually very useful stuff when you don't have anything else. I mean, I guess I could have filled it if I cut pieces of foam, but that would be so time consuming and it wouldn't look good. So this is a very good alternative where you can just fill any kind of amorphous gaps that form in different places. So there I just got the handle covered with this foam clay, or form clay, I guess they call it. And then I'm gonna work on the tip because it doesn't have enough material on it, so I want to beef it up a little bit so it looks a little bit more like part of the rest of the sword, of the nail. And yeah, I'm just just forming it with my hands, and then later on I will probably sand it just to make it so it doesn't stand out. Right now it looks like the tip is just covered in this weird stuff, so I want to make it so that it looks actually part of the sword. Okay, let's see what happens next. We go outside because now we're using the Dremel, because now we're going to clean up the edges. It's very important to clean up those edges, making it look nice and sharp, and come to a finer edge. Gives it a better look, and it actually cleans it up. It also cleans up all that glue. And as I was cleaning this, there was a portion that you're going to see here that became detached. You can barely see it. And later on I had to re-glue that and re-sand it with the Dremel. I don't think I actually showed that in the video, but that's what I had to do. So yeah, I'm just working on the whole thing. I'm cleaning it up, and now I'm using the heat gun to get rid of any kind of waves, to try to make it as flat as possible. You see that gap right there? I do address that gap later on, and I feel it. Here I'm looking at the sword because the nail actually is kind of like a broken piece that you can keep upgrading through the game, but at the beginning it starts as a piece that is kind of not broken, but it's like old and used and is not very good, basically. So it's got these marks across it, and so I'm just trying to mimic those marks and using the Dremel. The one tip I would have on the Dremel is don't move back and forth, just move in one direction. When I accidentally move forwards and then backwards, the Dremel tend to jump and it turned to like start to bite into the foam and it would start to tear it up. So I would recommend just be very careful, start from a lower speed and little by little go to a higher speed, because then you don't run the risk of the Dremel just like biting and then starting to skid all over the surface and ruining what you're working on. Here I'm just using a different Dremel attachment just to sand this stuff. I did sand a little bit too hard, so I took a lot of that off and then I had to reapply some of it later. It's not obvious. If I don't talk about it, then you won't notice it, but it's what happened to me during the process. Like I stripped a lot of that off and then I had to reapply it, you know. Sometimes you make mistakes, you have to come back and do it again. But yeah, here overall I'm just sanding. I wasn't happy with the previous sanding, so I'm making it a little bit more acute here so that it looks a little bit more like one piece. And then here I am. Here I'm gonna have some water. Give me 1 second. Gloop, gloop, gloop. Okay, yeah, my throat's getting dry. Here I'm just sanding the horns, and then I switch to a different type of sandpaper. Or to the sandpaper. I don't remember what the exact grade on this thing, but I thought it was a little bit heavier. I didn't really like it, so I ended up ordering some other... I ended up ordering some different kind of sandpaper that comes in like 3 different grids of sandpaper. It's always good to have a range of sandpaper, so as you're working you can tell what feels good and what's sticking too much and what's not taking enough. And once you get to the finer places, you want to use a finer grain and not so coarse, so it doesn't show so much. Here I'm just sealing the helmet with a heat gun so that I can prime it. And what I didn't realize is that this prime is black. So that's one of the things that I didn't really need to get white foam. I got white foam because I was just going to paint it white, and I didn't realize the primer was black. Once I started, we're like, let's just finish it. But I did have the titanium white spray paint that I show there, and so I just went ahead and did that on there. So the one way to prime it is to do it the way I did with that primer, whatever it's called. I mean, I put it on there, you guys will be able to see it. But the other way is to use a type of glue, kind of like a PVA glue material that you can use to prime the foam. And in the case of the nail, that's what I used. And here I got my sanding paper of different grits, and so I'm just working on the nail overall. This Mod Podge stuff is what I used to seal the nail. I didn't feel like painting it black with the other sealer, so I just used the Mod Podge. I guess I should have used the Mod Podge to seal the helmet as well instead of using the other product. I just didn't know the other product was going to be black. So that was my mistake. And here I'm just using the finer edge. Even with all this sanding, there were still quite a few imperfections that I wasn't happy with once the costume was done, because you could still see some imperfections, and it's just kind of hard. I guess I need to get work more on my technique on how to sand and how to blend a little bit better. I was not happy. I mean, just a regular person wouldn't really notice, but you know, anybody who makes stuff will notice imperfections. Because if you make stuff, you're always looking for perfect things, and you're looking for defects in your work, and you're looking for other work to see where they mess up or how they solve certain things. Here I just use some oil paint to fill in, you know, that area on the sword. And once I finished the nail and the helmet, I went ahead and decided to go on the costume. I got some gray felt, which kind of matches Hollow Knight's outfit. And literally, I just went with scissors. I thought that was the fastest. I was running out of time. I had another project that I was working on, which is a dragon that the next video is going to be a dragon painting video that I did for a competition, which I didn't win, which is okay. Doesn't matter. It's just showing how my skills have progressed. Maybe showing it to myself, you know. That's going to be the next video. It's going to be a red dragon. Here I'm just, you know, literally putting glue. This is very crude, by the way. Don't do this. I just put contact glue on this stuff. What I should have done is taken my time and sewn this properly. Glue is not a replacement for sewing stuff. So don't do this. This is a very amateur kind of thing to do. But hey, it works, and when you have limited time, it does work. But it's really messy, and it started coming apart, so it was just like, I was getting frustrated at this point because the pieces were just coming apart. And so I put a horizontal piece here to try to keep it all together. and then I went ahead and folded it on the other side, and even with all that, it was still coming apart. So what I had to do is I had to make a little thread out of that material, and here I am threading it through everything. And so, you know, when you try to do things fast, you're actually doing them slow. When you take your time and do them correctly, you actually do them fast. I think there's a saying, right? Slow is steady, steady is fast, or something like that. And so I am proof of concept, because that's what I was doing. So yeah, here I'm just threading. I'm just using this piece as a big thread, and so I'm just threading it through the whole thing, and so I can later on tie it and use it as a drawstring, and so I can tie it in front of myself just like a cape or a cloak. And there I am, just making sure everything, you know, fits okay. Oh, here I am. You can just buy this mesh online. I guess on the description I can put the names of all the materials I used, and I can put what kind of mesh I used. And so I'm using the glue and just putting mesh. I put 2 layers of mesh. I guess I could have put a 3rd layer of mesh, but I was just like, okay, I'm done with 2. So it makes it more obscure and they can't see your face. You can still see my face in the helmet if there's, depending on the light angle. Here I am actually putting Velcro in there because I'm gonna put a skull cap, and then I just put the Velcro also on the chin strap. And I also put a back piece so that my head doesn't hit the back of the helmet. And here I am trying the helmet. I'm just moving around to make sure that it stays. I know it looks really silly, but that's what I'm doing. I'm just moving around to make sure that the helmet stays in place, and that when I turn, the helmet turns with me and it doesn't, you know, stay straight. Here I'm making a scabbard for the nail so I can carry it on my back. So I had gotten just some black EVA. Is that what we decide that foam is called? EVA. And so that I could carry the nail on my back. And so here I'm just making it, and what I'm making is just kind of like a bandolier, just like a strap that goes around my shoulder. And it just has a gap so you can insert the nail and you can carry it. What was funny about it is that the angle in which I normally was carrying it, it just happens to match the angle in which Hollow Knight, somebody, you know, carries the nail in the game. And when it looks sideways, it looks goofy and looks really funny, and people actually like that. So, and here I'm just putting the other piece, and the middle of it is not gonna be glued so that the sword can slide in between the 2 pieces. And there you go, that's pretty much the build. And here we are at the Texas Renaissance Festival. We had just finished setting up our camp, and here we are with people at the festival. And I found some really cool costumes over there. And we can finish it with this. This is what it's all about, you know. This is why you dress up and why you try to find people that are like-minded.